Never write off the outsider. History, and the Bible, are full of people everybody counted out who ended up changing everything. If you've ever felt like the outsider, like you didn't belong, like your past disqualified you from anything good, this story was written specifically for you. Welcome back to the Word, where faith comes alive and truth hits home. All month long, we are going deep into the Bible's most overlooked, underestimated, and unlikely figures. The ones who weren't the obvious choice. The ones who came from the wrong place, the wrong background, or the wrong side of history. And yet, God used every single one of them. This is Underdog Month on the Word. And today's story, it might be the most powerful one yet. We're talking about a young woman named Ruth. A foreign widow with no status, no safety net, and no guarantee that anyone in a new land would even accept her. She had every reason to walk away from the hard path and take the easy road home. But she didn't. And what God did with her faithfulness, it ended up shaking history. Stick with this story to the end, because the twist in Ruth's life will completely change the way you see your own. To understand Ruth, you first have to understand the world she was born into. The book of Ruth opens in one of the darkest chapters in Israel's history, the time of the Judges. It was a period of chaos, moral compromise, and repeated cycles of failure. And on top of all that, a severe famine hit the land of Judah, the land that was literally called Bethlehem, which means house of bread. No bread in the house of bread. The symbolism alone tells you how bad things had gotten. A man named Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and their two sons packed up and did what desperate people do, they left. They crossed into Moab, a foreign nation, just to survive. It was supposed to be temporary. Just until things got better back home. But then Elimelech died. And Naomi was left a widow in a foreign land. Her sons eventually married two Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. For a moment, things looked stable again. Then both sons died too. 3 women, 3 widows. No husbands, no sons, no income, no future, at least not by the world's standards. Can you imagine standing in Naomi's shoes? She had left home full, with a husband, with sons, with hope. Now she was preparing to return completely empty. She was so broken by the weight of her losses that she told people to stop calling her Naomi, which means pleasant. "Call me Mara," she said. "It means bitter. Because the Almighty has made my life very bitter." Have you ever felt that way? Like life stripped everything from you, and the person you used to be feels like a stranger. Naomi was there. And God was watching. When Naomi heard the famine in Israel had ended, she decided to go home to Bethlehem. And she told both her daughters-in-law to do the same, go back to their own mothers, find new husbands, start fresh. It was a selfless act. She wasn't asking them to sacrifice their futures for her. Orpah kissed Naomi goodbye and headed home. And honestly, nobody blames her. It was the smart, safe, logical choice. But Ruth wouldn't let go. And then she said something that has echoed through 3,000 years of history. "Don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." Read that again slowly. Ruth wasn't just making a sentimental promise. She was making a covenant. She was choosing to give up everything, her homeland, her culture, her people, her gods, to follow an older grieving widow to an unfamiliar land where she would be viewed as a foreigner and an outsider. Why would she do that? Because something had happened in those years of living alongside Naomi's family. Ruth had seen something real in the God of Israel. She had witnessed faith that didn't just sit in a temple, it showed up in how this family loved each other, grieved together, and kept trusting even through devastation. And that kind of faith, you don't walk away from it. Ruth's declaration wasn't just loyalty to Naomi. It was an act of worship. She was choosing the one true God, even when it cost her everything familiar. The two women walked roughly 80 kilometers of rough terrain, 2 widows traveling alone, no male protection, no guarantee of what waited on the other side. When they finally arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town stirred. People barely recognized Naomi. But the barley harvest was just beginning. And in a story guided by divine providence, timing is never accidental. The next morning, Ruth woke up early and asked Naomi if she could go glean in the fields. Under Israelite law, landowners were commanded not to harvest the edges of their fields or pick up what fell during the harvest. That grain was to be left for the poor, the widows, and the foreigners. So Ruth went out, a foreigner in a strange land, doing the lowest possible work, picking up scraps behind the harvesters. And the text says she just happened to end up in a field belonging to a man named Boaz. Just happened. Two of the most loaded words in the entire book. Because Boaz wasn't just any landowner. He was a man of standing, of integrity, a man who feared God. And critically, he was a close relative of Naomi's deceased husband Elimelech. In Hebrew law, that made him what's called a kinsman-redeemer, someone who had the legal right and responsibility to restore a deceased relative's family. When Boaz arrived at his field that day and noticed the foreign woman working tirelessly in the heat, he asked about her. His foreman said she had been there since early morning, barely stopping. And Boaz, without even knowing her yet, went out of his way to protect her. He told her to stay in his field and not go anywhere else. He instructed his workers not to touch her. He gave her access to the water. He invited her to share the meal with his workers. And then, when she went back to gleaning, he secretly told his men to pull extra grain from the bundles on purpose and leave it for her. When Ruth asked him why he was being so kind to her, a foreigner, an outsider, Boaz said, "I've heard everything you've done for your mother-in-law. How you left your own family and your own land to care for her. The Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Under whose wings? That phrase. It's no accident. Because later, Ruth would use that exact language when she approached Boaz at the threshing floor, asking him to spread the corner of his garment over her. A cultural symbol for marriage. A request for redemption, for covering, for belonging. Naomi, watching all of this unfold, recognized what God was doing. She guided Ruth to go to Boaz at the threshing floor that night, to lie at his feet in a symbolic act that communicated her request for him to fulfill his role as kinsman-redeemer. Boaz woke in the night, found Ruth there, and understood immediately what she was asking. He didn't see it as scandalous. He called it an act of kindness, greater than her first. He was moved that she hadn't chased after younger or wealthier men, but had honored the ancient law and come to him. But he was honest with her. There was one other relative with a closer legal claim. And Boaz, being a man of integrity, was going to do this right. The next morning, Boaz went to the city gate, the ancient version of a courthouse, gathered 10 elders as witnesses, and presented the matter to the closer relative. At first the man was interested. Redeeming Naomi's land? Sure. But then Boaz added the full condition. You also have to marry Ruth the Moabite, the widow, to carry on the dead man's name. The man backed out immediately. If he married Ruth and they had a son, that son would legally carry Elimelech's inheritance, not his. It would cost him without adding to his own legacy. He wasn't willing. He handed Boaz his sandal, the ancient equivalent of signing the paperwork. And Boaz, before all the witnesses, made his declaration. I have acquired Ruth the Moabite as my wife, to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from the town's records. The outsider had been redeemed. The foreigner had found her place. The woman who had walked away from everything familiar had been brought fully and publicly into the family of Israel. Ruth and Boaz married. And God blessed their union with a son named Ob. When he was born, the women of Bethlehem celebrated not just Ruth and Boaz, they celebrated Naomi. The woman who had returned empty, who had renamed herself Bitterness, who had felt abandoned by God, she was holding a grandson in her arms. The neighbors said it perfectly. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons has given him birth. Better than 7 sons. In a culture where sons were everything, those words were the highest honor anyone could give a woman. Ruth, the foreign outsider, had become more precious to Naomi than anything the world could have offered. And then the book of Ruth ends with a genealogy. And this is where the whole story explodes into something you cannot overstate. Obed became the father of Jesse. Jesse became the father of David. David, Israel's greatest king. And hundreds of years later, the Gospel of Matthew opens with the genealogy of Jesus Christ, and right there in the list, Boaz was the father of Obed by Ruth. Ruth, the Moabite, the outsider. The woman who wasn't supposed to be admitted into the assembly of Israel. She is named in the bloodline of the Messiah. One of only 5 women mentioned in Jesus' entire family tree. The same woman who came with nothing, no status, no rights, no guarantees, is memorialized forever in the lineage of the Son of God. Here's what the story of Ruth tells us about God, and about our own lives. First, God uses outsiders. Ruth was a Moabite, historically excluded, ethnically despised, legally barred from the assembly. But true faith transcends bloodlines. God wasn't impressed by ancestry. He was moved by Ruth's loyalty, her courage, and her choice to run under his wings. Your background does not disqualify you from God's story. It might actually be the very thing that makes your chapter remarkable. Second, your hardest season might be setting up your greatest breakthrough. Naomi returned to Bethlehem convinced God had turned against her. She arrived bitter, empty, broken. But what she couldn't see was that the very same journey had brought her daughter-in-law, the one who would change everything, right to the doorstep of their Redeemer. God was writing the story she couldn't yet read. Third, Boaz is a picture of Jesus. He was a close relative with the right to redeem. He saw someone others overlooked. He paid the price to bring her in, completely, legally, permanently, not because of anything she could offer him, but because of who he was. Jesus did the same for us. He became our kinsman by taking on flesh, and he paid the price to redeem us from everything that had us bound. As Paul writes in Ephesians chapter 1 verse 7, in him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins in accordance with the riches of his grace. And finally, small acts of faithfulness carry eternal weight. When Ruth said, "Where you go, I will go," she had no idea that simple act of loyalty would place her in the lineage of the Messiah. You don't have to see the whole plan. You just have to take the next faithful step. The rest is God's job. This is Underdog Month and we're just getting started. The next video is already on your screen, don't miss it.